Alright, shout out to 4 people who have been liking the videos. Appreciate y'all into this EJ oil clearance video. Basically, I got these King bearings, some .026 and some standard. I thought I actually ended up getting the standard X, but ended up getting the .026, which is a tighter bearing. Ended up working out in the long run because I believe the case halves that we sent to the machine shop are a little on the loose side as far as the bores for the crank. We had this other bad crank and these other 2.5 case halves. I ended up plastic gauging a lot of different combinations. The old case halves with the old crank, and I believe these are OEM bearings. Everything came out a little on the loose side, about 1.6 thousandths. Ended up putting the good crank in here with those OEM bearings. Got similar numbers. Ended up putting the .026 bearings in these case halves with our good crank that went to machine shop, and we got slightly tighter tolerances. So I believe the King bearings are just a little on the loose side. So I think what we're gonna end up running is the .026 bearings. We'll go ahead and show a little bit of the plastic gauge process and maybe a little bit of my mess up on the dial bore gauge. Just couldn't get it dialed in properly. I think it's mostly due to the Harbor Freight micrometer. There's just a high spot on anvils, and I can't get that exact high spot centered on the dial bore gauge to get it zeroed out. So let's see what happens. All the parts back from the machine shop. I think they were there about 3 months. The bottom end case halves, crank, rods, and pistons took a little bit longer. The one guy that does that was a little bit backed up. I did go with King bearings. We do have a standard X and a standard size.
So here we go.
So I don't know if you can see, but there's a little bit of stuff coming off the bearing. So I'm gonna pop it back out, and maybe we're gonna have to wipe all these down just to double check them.
All right, so mine already messed up. Got a couple little marks on the bearing from the first attempt. Not quite sure how else to pop it in without... So which one is that, number 3? Let's see if I can come do this one. I'll wipe this one down. I haven't even put this one in yet, and it's got some interesting marks right there by that oil hole. I don't know if that's coming up on camera. That's just the way it came in the package. So this one's in the middle, we'll have to...
All right, so first bearing in, interesting experience. We did have a little bit of scraping on the outside of the case half right there. Just wiped off. I don't know if that's paint or just a coating. Same thing over here. There was a little imperfection on the back of the bearing. Not too worried about that, but they're both all in that center main. All right, got the number 5 thrust bearing. There is a little bit of, I don't know, residue or something. It almost looks like surface rust in there. There's no locating tabs, little notches. Some weird thing I guess King does. But I am just gonna keep them in the same orientation as all the other bearings. That's why I put that first one in the third main right there. I just wanted to double check some stuff, so I did watch a couple of videos on YouTube, make sure everything's going right, and then actually you can go to kingcatalog.com, put in your part number right there. It will pull up a parts list. We select that one right there at the top, and it actually gives you the locations of all the bearings and their little part numbers. So just double checking, make sure everything's correct. So we've got 1, 3, and 5 installed. We've cleaned all those and put them in. I did double check and clean the case halves as well, just real quick. And then you can see right here, maybe 2 PRG. So that's the 2 and 4 mains, and then the 1 PRG were 1 and 3, and then obviously number 5 is the thrust bearing. All right, this is the last bearing to go in. Everything's been cleaned before, and then on that King racing video, they say you should be able to just press it down. I haven't had any other issues with any other debris coming off installing the rest of these bearings after I've cleaned them pretty well. But what I've been doing is just kind of lining up the one side with the groove and then pressing inward while rolling my thumb down, and it's done a pretty good job. All right, everything's marginally clean. We're now going to put the crank into the right side case half. Need to be very careful to keep this aligned as possible, like I'm not doing right now.
And then it must not spin or move at all once it's in. Finger's stuck in the back. I think it did go in fairly easy. I did clean up the crank one more time before I placed it in. So now, actually what I'm going to do is pick up the crank and rotate it slightly so that these oil holes are not on the top facing upwards, because I think that's where I want to put my plastic gauge. So let's lift it up. Oh, wasn't even all the way in. Oh, thank you. Let's try this. Okay.
And because we're just doing the plastic gauge, there's no assembly lube or anything. That's why we're not spinning the crank. And I won't be putting in any O-rings or any sealant. And that's also why the rods aren't installed yet. Plastic gauge. All right, I believe in the assembly instructions somewhere it did say to oil the locating pins.
Now I can see. It's still real difficult to see from this high up. Alright, pretty close. It's time for the bolts.
Okay, we got our little instructions here for the STI, Mo Power Baby. I found these online somewhere, the whole PDF FSM, so if I can find it again, I'll put a link in the description. But it actually looks like, if you see number 2, position the crankshaft on number 2 cylinder block. I think I actually did it on number 1 and 3 cylinder block. I don't think it really matters, but I just thought it would be the other way around so the O-rings wouldn't fall out. But we'll just follow the instructions here and the torque sequence. And actually move the block to the ground, make it a little bit easier to work on and easier to see. But now we're back on the left-hand side of the block. So you'd have to put the right-hand side on top of the left side, then flip it back over to this side to apply engine oil to the washers and threaded bolts, and tighten the 10mm cylinder block connecting bolts, alphabetical sequence shown below, A, B, C, D. So we'll need 2 of the long ones with the sealing washers and 2 of the short ones.
Was it A, B, C, D? So then we're doing here, A, what was it, B, C, and then D, right?
Yeah, we got a 12.12mm, and we will start torquing these down to 10 Newton meters.
And the alphabetical sequence of the FSM. So I don't know if that's good. Ooh, was it A, B, C, D? So A, ooh, B, ooh, C. 10 Newton meters. Whoa, way too much. A, B, C. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't oil these. Alright, attempt number 2, I did oil the threads and the washers. That's what it says to do in the manual, so that's what we'll do. Let's try this again. Whoa. Oh. Let me double check, make sure this is Newton meters. Newton meters, 10 Newton meters. Found some random batteries in a drawer. Looks like they're still dead, but less dead than the other ones. Alright. 10 Newton meters. 10. 10. 10. Alright, we got those tighten 10mm cylinder block connecting bolts now for the sequence shown as the right hand. They're just showing the left hand side in this picture, but they're showing the bolts from the right hand side. So you can see J's in the dotted circle. So was that A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. So we're going to figure this out reversed on the other side. Alright, to make this a little bit easier, I tried to mirror this image so that you're actually looking at what you're looking at. So you're actually looking at it from the right side. So we should have 6 left over. You can see I actually messed up the cylinder holes. These are, what is this, 1 and 3? And so that would be 1 and 3 from the other side, but not from this side. It would be 4, 2 and 4 over here, so I just kind of messed that up. But let's see, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. So there's E, F, what is it? G, H, I, J. Is that how it went? E, F, G up top, H, I, J. But anyway, we got 6 left over, the 6 bolts. The 2 without the sealing washers will go where it doesn't need a seal, right there. So, alright, so E, top middle, sealing washer, F, bottom middle, sealing washer, G, top right, sealing washer, H, outside, bottom left, no sealing washer, I, bottom right, sealing washer, J, top left, no sealing washer. Was it E, F, G, H, I, J. I think that's right. 10 Newton meters again, with a dead battery. E, F, G, H, I, J. What's next? 7. Further tighten the left-hand side bolts A through D. Alphabetical sequence to 18 Newton meters. Alright, we'll bump it up to 18 and look at this again. What does this say? A, B, C, D. A, 18. B, 18. C, 18, D. 18. Number 8, further tighten right hand E to J, not BJ, to 18. So let's flip it back over. Oh. Alright. What is this, the right hand side? 18 Newton meters. E, F, G H I J. What are we on now? Right hand side 18, left hand side by 90 degrees for A and C, and 40 newton meters for B and D. Interesting. 90 degrees, interesting. So now we gotta go back to newton meters up to 40 for B. Alright, back to degrees for C. 90 degrees. 97. Back to 40 newton meters. Essentially this was right about 41 newton meters. It does give you the newton meter value after you degree it. 40 newton meters. So I think we're good on the left hand. So we're back on the right hand side of the block, passenger side. And all of these are 90 degrees, no 40 newton meters. So we'll start with E, top middle. 90 degrees. F, bottom middle. 90 degrees. G, top right. 90 degrees. H, bottom left. 90 degrees. Now still see. What is it? E, F, G, H, I. 90 degrees. 42 newton meters. I don't know if y'all caught that. E, F, G, H, I, J. Last one, 90 degrees. Replace that. I don't remember if there was a loosening sequence, but I just loosened them all about a quarter turn at a time, moving them outside in on both sides, so they're all about, you know. What's loose? I just hit the crank. Alright, here's the plastic gauge. You can see that one little part in the middle is from the gap in the bearing. But these are the, that one fell, I guess, when I was putting it together. That one, there we go. So let's measure.
All right, so let's check this first one. We're looking in millimeters right here, and it looks like it could be anywhere between 0.025 millimeters and 0.038. It is, the plastic gauge is bigger than the 0.038 indicator measurement, and actually it might be right on the 0.025. Let's check the rest of these. All right, just gonna do a quick rundown comparing. This one looks like it's between 0.025, 0.038. This one actually looks a little bit looser. I guess this is number 2. Between 0.038, it's just a little bit smaller than 0.038 and just a little bit bigger than 0.051. This is number 3. We kind of missed this one. Somewhere around the 0.038, smaller than 0.051. So probably somewhere around the 0.038 measurement. This is what, number 4. This one also is pretty loose. Looks like maybe about 0.051. Definitely not 0.038. And then number 5, the thrust bearing, 0.038, pretty close. Yeah, probably pretty close between 0.038 and 0.025. I might write these measurements down, just kind of get a better idea of where they're at, and then we'll compare those to some other research that I've done to see what people are running. So these obviously aren't accurate measurements, they're just ballpark ideas of what we've got, but I just tried to get a estimate of what it was in between the two values that it was in between on the plastic gauge, and came down here. Number 2 and number 4 were both a little on the loose side. Everything else was pretty close to the 0.038 mark on the plastic gauge. All right, here we are, still working on this, torqued this together 100 times, trying to get the bearing clearances somewhere within spec. Actually ended up ordering the wrong bearings. I was trying to order a looser bearing, which would be the standard X, but under Rally Sport Direct's website, when you select the oversized bearing, the undersized bearing actually comes up, which is the 0.026. Which is actually what we have in here right now without the crank. I had these tighter bearings in, and the tolerances were a little on the loose side. I put the standard bearings in, and using plastic gauge, I found the tolerances to be even looser. So now I broke down and actually bought a caliper set and a dial bore gauge, and we're just going to triple check these measurements to see what we got.
So starting out, I'm just zeroing out the mic. I measured this 2-inch stock, and we got about 2.0005 of an inch. So we're off by half a thousandth. I did take some preliminary measurements of the crank journals. I believe this is the standard spec, 2.3619 to 2.3625. That's in inches. If you look at these initial measurements I took, they all look to be pretty close. If we consider this to be half a thousandths off, so minus 0.0005 from each of these, that would be 2.3626, so right on the top end spec. This would be 20, or 21, I'm sorry, right above the bottom end spec. This would be actually 19 right at the bottom end spec. 28 would be 23, which would be right in the middle. And then I measured number 5 twice. I don't think I got an accurate measurement. I might have torqued it down too tight, but if you look here, that would be right at 19. So it looks like our crank is within spec. That would lead me to believe that the bore between the case halves might be a little loose. So we're going to double check it. We're going to measure each journal, set up the dial bore gauge with the mic, and see if we can see our clearances. Alright, so I got the dial indicator set up, got the dial in the end, selected this 2.4 anvil, slightly bigger than our 2.3 bore that we're looking for. Now we're going to measure each bore in comparison to the journal and the crank. So this is number 1 from the engine, number 1 from the crank. Let's see if we can measure something here very gently. Not sure if y'all can see anything on the GoPro. Right there. Clicked a couple times, measure a couple different spots, just a tiny amount of drag. We could probably even tighten this just a pinch more. Nope. So let's measure this. This little thing locks it down. Double check. See if we matched our first measurement. So we got 2.123, and then you can see 1, 2 graduations. So let's just write this down. We've got 2 inches, 0.123, and then there's 2 graduations. That would be 0.025, 0.050 plus whatever's on here. So that's 10, 11, 12. So 50 plus 12 is 62. And then we find whatever one matches up here. It looks actually like that. Actually, it might look like 13 lines right up. I might call this 3, 0. Okay, so I actually wrote it on the wrong line. But my first measurement was 2.3631. This measurement came out to 2.3630. And if we account for the 0.0005 difference, we bring that down, it would be right at the top end of the spec. That should be right here. Let's cross this out. 2.3630. And then we just subtract that. So this first journal should be dead on the crank. Now, we need to zero this line bore gauge out. There we go. So trying to rest my hand on the bench vise here and trying to center this as best I can. We're moving it around as much as we can. We're right about, what is that, 5 to 6 thousandths max. So that will be our 0 point. So let's do this. That or micrometer might be slightly off. Not 100% square on this little anvil side and the moving side, because I'm over here on the top end. I'm like right over 0. But as soon as I go down to this bottom side, oh no, I'm still pretty close. Maybe a thousandth. I think there's like a...
See, there's like a half thousandth between the mic. This is why you need to buy good tools.
Let's go by the short end of the mic. See, even on the bottom, we're still getting pretty close to 0. Just got close right there. I don't know if you can see this, but the max we're getting is 2 tick marks on this gauge. So we need to determine what 2 tick marks mean.
Real quick, little issue I'm running into here. When I tried to zero this out, it was half a thousandth off. And if you look closely, I don't know if you can tell, but this, I don't know what this part is called. This part that spins, the barrel or whatever, is slightly at an angle. It's just not precise. You can see there's our half thousandth too big, and we can roll this in the measuring point. You can see there's that high point right there at the top. So we can roll it all the way in. It's almost at like the top back is just a little tight point. So when I'm trying to zero out the dial bore gauge, there's about, I don't know, maybe half a thousandth, 1,000th difference between this tight end and the loose end. So I'm going to try and measure the journal one more time on this tight end and zero it out with the dial bore gauge on this tight end, and we'll see what we can find. Maybe we'll go swap this caliper out for another Harbor Freight bullshit one. All right, I've zeroed out the dial bore gauge after remeasuring the first journal on the crank with the mic. I did it at the loosest setting possible, which still turned out to be about 2.3635 inches. And then if you account for that 0.0005 difference, it's about half a thousandth over the spec. And then we will just see what our dial bore gauge says. I'm gonna compress it in there, rotate it up, try and move it around a little bit. So if you can see on this gauge, 0 is the crank journal and then we come up, that's 0.5 1,000th, 1.5, a little over 1.5 thousandths. So let's say 1 point. All right, smart people probably caught that, but if you look closely right here, as I compress the needle on the dial bore gauge, it gets closer to 0. So when you zero it out on the mic, that point right there is the thickness of, or the 0 point is the thickness of the journal. Anything to the left of that 0 would be a bigger measurement, or the inside diameter of the bearing. If you look closely in that video, the needle actually goes up to 0, passes 0, and then I'm measuring right here for the clearance. That would actually be a negative clearance or an interference. Say, what is that, 16 thousandths? 0.0017. So if we look over here, on the left side is my estimates from the plastic gauge. It was just in between the 0.001 and 0.0015 mark. I just estimated it at that. And then you can see with the dial bore gauge and the bad mic that's not really accurate, we're getting somewhere close, right over 0.0015, 0.0016. What is Rocky doing? Rocky, what are you doing over there? Are you stuck? Did you get trapped? All right, so you can see here my initial measurements was in millimeters. Standard was like even further out. Actual journals on the crank. With the Harbor Freight mic, they did come in very close. The plastic gauge estimates, I believe from the first time, just switched it to inches. This is with the .026 bearings. These were my first initial measurements. You could see in that last little section of video where I got 1.6 thousandths. That was actually a negative measurement. All these are negative measurements. They were on the other side of the 0 on the dial bore gauge. All right, so this was the control block. That other 2.5 case halves I have, I believe those are OEM bearings in there, and these were the measurements I got. Now these are all a little bit on the outside of spec. You can see spec up here is 0.00012 to 0.0012. So we're looking for 0012 as the top end spec. I forgot what the limit was, but these are all on the top end of the spec, even with that other 2.5 case half and the other crank. This is the measurements from that other crank. They all came out really close to the crank that we have that we sent to the machine shop. The machine block with the good crank, I re-plastic gauged it just to see if I could repeat the measurements, and it looks like a couple might have come in a little bit tighter, but you can see they all look about the same. We're comparing these two. These are both the .026 bearings with the good crank. The plastic gauge I was using originally was really old, so I might have run over it with the little wheelie chair too. When I was testing it again, I actually pulled some out. It was all breaking apart, and just with the naked eye, some of the plastic gauge looked like it was different diameters. I ended up picking up some new plastic gauge, reconfirmed it. This was the control block with those random bearings. I believe they're OEM, and our good machine crank, and you can see that our measurements are almost exactly the same, so that leads me to believe that there's no issue with the crank. It's either with the 2.5 case halves that we sent to the machine shop or the King bearings. So I basically put the .026 bearings and that good crank and that other 2.5 block, and we did get a little bit tighter tolerances just by like 0.0002. I think the other measurement was 1.5. So we're getting like 2 0.010 difference tighter with the .026 bearings and that other crank. So I think we'll be good with this. I'll throw in a couple pictures or screenshots of bearing clearances that other people have run.